Welcome back to Void of Fears, where the line between nightmares and reality blurs with every story. Our community grows stronger with each brave soul who joins us. We're 8,000 deep now, creeping toward our goal of 10,000 subscribers by year's end. If you dare to continue this journey with us, hit that subscribe button now. Leave your mark with a like. Share your own encounters in the comments below. Now, let's begin today's story. The first time I heard it, I thought it was just interference. A glitch in the audio feed, nothing more. When you're analysing sounds from a probe nearly 400 million miles away, you expect some distortion. But then I heard it again, and again, each time clearer, each time more deliberate. My name is Dr. Alex Winters. I'm a xenobiologist specialising in audio analysis for the Europa Exploration Initiative, a privately funded organisation with a single mission: to determine if Jupiter's ice-covered moon harbours life beneath its frozen surface. Our Clipper Rover, an autonomous underwater probe, was deployed 6 months ago to explore Europa's subsurface ocean after penetrating through nearly 15 miles of ice. I work alone mostly. My lab is located in a remote facility in northern Alaska, away from urban noise pollution that might contaminate my work. The walls are lined with acoustic dampening panels, creating an environment so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat. Banks of specialized equipment surround my workstation: spectrum analyzers, pattern recognition software, and neural network processors designed to detect biological signatures in audio patterns. The isolation doesn't bother me. I've always preferred the company of sounds to people. My colleagues joke that I can hear a pin drop from across a crowded room, but miss someone calling my name right beside me. They're not entirely wrong. My brain has always been wired to prioritize certain auditory inputs over others. It's what makes me good at my job, even if it makes me somewhat awkward at cocktail parties. Europa has fascinated scientists for decades. Slightly smaller than our own moon, its surface is a maze of cracks and ridges in the ice, evidence of the liquid ocean beneath. Tidal forces from Jupiter's enormous gravitational pull keep the water liquid despite the frigid temperatures. If life exists elsewhere in our solar system, Europa's ocean is one of our best bets for finding it. Getting the Clipper Rover there was a monumental achievement. Previous missions had only scratched the surface, literally. They'd landed on the ice, deployed sensors, even drilled small sample cores. But Clipper was the first to break through completely, carrying with it humanity's hopes of discovering extraterrestrial life. The data packages arrive every 27 hours, the time it takes for our communications to reach Europa and return. Each package contains hours of audio recordings, along with temperature readings, chemical analyses, and occasional video when the probe's limited power budget allows. For months, the sounds were exactly what we expected. The low groans of ice shifting above, the gentle flow of underwater currents, occasional pops and hisses from hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor. Until October 17th, I was reviewing the day's package late in the evening when I noticed an anomaly in the audio spectrum display, a frequency pattern that didn't match anything in our database. I isolated the segment and enhanced it, filtering out the ambient noise of Europa's ocean. That's when I heard it for the first time, a sound so faint I almost missed it. A long, undulating call that rose and fell in pitch, lasting approximately 12 seconds before fading away. It wasn't mechanical, it wasn't geological. It had the organic quality of something vocal. I ran it through every analysis program we had. Nothing matched. Not whale songs, not underwater volcanic activity, not ice fracturing. Nothing. I spent the night replaying it, adjusting parameters, trying to convince myself it was just an unusual interaction of natural forces. By morning, I had almost succeeded. Then 3 days later, the sound appeared again in the next data package. slightly louder, slightly clearer. And this time there was something about it that made the hair on my arms stand up. A quality in the modulation that seemed impossible for random, natural processes to produce. I recorded a message to send with the next transmission to Dr. Eleanor Thompson, our mission director at EEI headquarters in Colorado. Eleanor, I've isolated an audio anomaly in sectors 12 and now 14, sending the enhanced files with this message. This doesn't match any known natural phenomenon in our reference database. I believe it warrants further investigation. While waiting for her response, I became obsessed with the sound. I began calling it the howl, though that wasn't quite right. It was more complex than a howl, more like a song with distinct phrases, though alien in its composition. It echoed in my head even when I wasn't listening to it. Sleep became difficult. When I did manage to drift off, I dreamed of dark waters and distant calls. Eleanor's response arrived 2 days later. Interesting find, Alex. Our team has reviewed the audio. While unusual, it could be explained by several natural phenomena, perhaps a new type of cryovolcanic activity or resonance in cavities formed by shifting ice. Keep monitoring, but don't get too excited yet. Remember the face on Mars debacle. I understood her caution. Scientific careers had been ruined by jumping to extraordinary conclusions. But I knew sounds. It was my specialty, my life's work. Whatever made this howl was not an inanimate process. Over the next few weeks, the sound appeared with increasing frequency. I began tracking patterns, noting the probe's location each time the howl manifested. A clear correlation emerged. The sounds were strongest when Clipper approached a particular deep trench in Europa's ocean floor, about 30 miles from our entry point. I nicknamed it the Siren Trench in my private notes. The mythological connection seemed fitting, though I kept that detail to myself when I sent my findings to Eleanor, along with a formal request to deviate from our planned exploration route to investigate the trench more thoroughly. This time, her response came quickly. Request approved for Clipper deviation to investigate trench 459B. The science team is intrigued by your findings. Proceed with caution, Alex, and try to get some sleep. You look terrible in your video messages. She was right about my appearance. Dark circles had formed under my eyes. I'd lost weight. My colleagues on the weekly video conference had started exchanging worried glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Dr. Patel, our geologist, suggested I take a few days off. I declined. The night before Clipper was scheduled to explore the trench, I had the most vivid nightmare yet. I was floating in Europa's ocean, except I had no protection from the freezing water. Strangely, I felt them no cold, no need to breathe, just the crushing pressure of the depths and a sensation of being watched from below. As I drifted downward into increasing darkness, something vast moved beneath me, something that had been waiting for a very long time. I woke gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat despite the chill of my Alaskan quarters. The digital clock beside my bed read 3:17 a.m. I knew I wouldn't sleep again, so I made coffee and reviewed our plans for the day ahead. Clipper would reach the edge of the trench by 10:30 a.m. Alaska time. We had programmed it to proceed cautiously, taking extensive readings before beginning its descent. The probe was equipped with powerful lights, cameras, sonar, and a suite of chemical sensors. If there was something down there to find, Clipper would find it. The morning dragged by. I checked and rechecked my equipment, calibrated my audio systems, and waited impatiently for the data to arrive. The rest of the team was connected via video conference, an unusual occurrence for a routine exploration maneuver. Everyone felt the significance of this moment, though no one wanted to explicitly voice our shared hope that we might be about to discover the first evidence of extraterrestrial life. The data package arriving that morning contained Clipper's telemetry as it approached the trench. Everything was nominal. Power systems functioning, sensors active, cameras ready. The probe's path would take it to the edge of the trench, then down in a slow spiral to minimize disturbance of the environment. "Approaching trench perimeter now," announced Dr. Keller, our robotics expert, who was monitoring Clipper's navigation systems, from Germany. "All systems nominal, beginning preliminary scans." As Clipper reached the trench's edge, our sensors detected unusual thermal patterns. Pockets of water nearly 15 degrees warmer than the surrounding area, with no obvious heat source. Electromagnetic readings fluctuated in ways our engineers couldn't explain. "Could be hydrothermal activity below detection range," suggested Dr. Patel, but even he didn't sound convinced. The first sonar maps of the trench came through, revealing its true scale. It wasn't just deep, it was enormous, extending for miles in either direction, like a massive wound in Europa's oceanic floor. Its walls dropped nearly vertically, descending beyond the range of our initial scans. "Initiating descent sequence," Dr. Keller announced. We all fell silent, watching our respective data feeds as Clipper began to sink into the abyss. Then, as the probe began its descent, the first camera images came through. The walls of the trench weren't smooth as we'd expect from glacial or tectonic activity. They contained regular patterns, grooves and protrusions that appeared almost architectural. "Are you seeing this?" Dr. Patel messaged from Colorado. "Those formations can't be natural." I barely had time to respond before Clipper's depth reached 2,000 meters below the ocean floor level. Communications became spotty, expected at this depth, but frustrating at such a crucial moment. Between bursts of static, the audio feed came through. The howl was there, no longer distant, but clear and powerful. It filled my lab, a complex arrangement of tones that seemed to resonate with something primal in my brain. For a moment, I thought I understood something in it. A pattern, a meaning, but it slipped away as quickly as it had come. The video feed stabilized briefly. In the murky water illuminated by Clipper's powerful lights, something moved. Not small, not close. Something massive, undulating in the distance. Before I could enhance the image, the video cut out completely. The audio continued for another 7 seconds. The howl changed, becoming more rapid, more intense. Then silence. All communication with Clipper ceased at 11:37 a.m. Alaska time on November 3rd. The next 16 hours were chaos. Engineers worked frantically to re-establish contact. Theories flew back and forth: equipment failure, power loss, destruction of the probe by unforeseen geological activity. No one wanted to suggest what the visual data had hinted at before connection was lost. I hadn't left my station since the incident, surviving on coffee and protein bars from my emergency stash. My colleagues urged me to rest, but how could I? We were on the verge of the most significant discovery in human history, or we had just lost $1 billion probe to some mundane technical failure. Either way, I needed to know. At 3:42 a.m. the following morning, a partial data package arrived. The signal was weak, as if Clipper was operating on emergency power. It contained corrupt video files, fragmented sensor readings, and 22 seconds of audio. I isolated myself in my lab to clean up the final recording. Hour after hour, I filtered noise, enhanced signals, reconstructed damaged segments. By evening, I had something clear enough to analyze. The howl had changed. It was no longer a distant call, but a complex series of sounds that modulated in ways impossible for random noise. It had structure, patterns, intention. I ran it through our biological signature algorithms, and the results were undeniable. 97% probability of biological origin, 82% probability of complex vocalization, rather than incidental biological noise. In simpler terms, it was communication. My hands trembled as I prepared my report. I'd dedicated my life to the search for extraterrestrial life, and now I might have found it. Not microbes, not primitive organisms, but something capable of producing complex sounds that appeared to be communication, something intelligent. I sent my findings to Eleanor along with my conclusion. We had discovered evidence of intelligent alien life in Europa's oceans. Her response was to call an emergency video conference with the entire science team and EEI's board of directors. "Alex has made a compelling case," Eleanor said after I presented my analysis. "While we must maintain scientific rigor and consider all possibilities, the evidence suggests something unprecedented." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "In light of these findings, the board has accelerated plans for a manned mission to Europa. Launch is scheduled for April next year." The news should have thrilled me. It was validation of my work, the chance for humanity's first contact with alien intelligence. Instead, a sense of unease settled over me, a feeling that we were moving too quickly towards something we didn't understand. In the days that followed, Clipper sent sporadic, fragmentary transmissions. The probe was clearly damaged, but still somewhat functional. Each transmission contained snippets of sensor data and, more importantly, audio recordings of the howling. Each time, the sounds were more complex, more varied, evolving in ways that defied explanation. I established a routine of sleeping during the day and working through the night when transmissions from Europa were most likely to arrive. The howling invaded my dreams regardless of when I slept. In my nightmares, I was always sinking deeper into Europa's ocean, always being watched by something ancient and vast, always feeling a strange mixture of terror and anticipation. December arrived with a blizzard that cut off our Alaska facility from the outside world for nearly a week. I barely noticed. My world had narrowed to my lab, my audio equipment, and the haunting sounds from another world. Dr. Morris, our staff physician, expressed concern about my mental state during our monthly checkup. "You're showing signs of extreme stress and sleep deprivation," he said, examining my bloodshot eyes. "I'm prescribing a mild sedative and 2 weeks of mandatory leave. Go somewhere warm, Alex. Get away from this place." I filled the prescription but never took the medication. As for leaving, the thought of being away from my lab when a new transmission arrived was unbearable. I thanked him, promised to rest more, and returned to work. By January, we had received enough partial transmissions to piece together some understanding of what had happened to Clipper. The probe had suffered catastrophic damage during its descent into the trench, likely from some kind of pressure wave or underwater current our models hadn't predicted. Now it was drifting, partially functional, occasionally being carried closer to whatever was generating the sounds. The video data was mostly corrupted, but one frame had been reconstructed clearly enough to cause a stir among the science team. It showed what appeared to be a structure deep within the trench, a massive formation that couldn't possibly be natural, with geometric patterns and what might have been openings or entrances. The image quality was too poor to be certain, but it fueled speculation that we had discovered evidence of an underwater civilization on Europa. In the 6 months that followed, I continued analysing the final transmissions from Clipper while helping prepare for the manned mission. The probe never resumed regular communications, though occasional bursts of corrupted data arrived, each containing fragments of that same haunting sound. My work shifted from pure analysis to preparing training materials for the Europa mission crew. They would need to know what to listen for, what to look for. Most importantly, they needed to know what to avoid. I had developed theories about the howling, that it might be a form of echolocation, or a territorial warning, or even an attempt at communication. But without more data, these were just educated guesses. As the launch date approached, I was officially invited to join the crew of the research vessel Odyssey. It was an honour I couldn't refuse, despite my growing apprehension. "Your expertise will be invaluable," Eleanor told me during the call. "No one understands what we're dealing with better than you do." that was precisely what worried me. The Odyssey was a marvel of engineering, a spacecraft designed specifically for the Europa mission, built with technology that wouldn't exist for another decade if not for the urgency of our discovery. It would carry a crew of 12 specialists plus 2 advanced submersibles capable of withstanding Europa's ocean pressures. During mission preparation at NASA's Johnson Space Center, I gained higher security clearance, which gave me access to files previously unavailable. Late one night, unable to sleep, a common condition for me now, I searched the database for previous Europa missions. What I found disturbed me deeply. Before our Clipper Rover, there had been 3 other attempts to explore Europa's ocean, each classified and each ending in failure. More disturbing were notes about audio anomalies detected by each mission before contact was lost, anomalies remarkably similar to my howl. Further digging revealed that these sounds had been analysed extensively by military intelligence and various research institutions. Several scientists who had worked extensively with the unfiltered audio had reported vivid dreams about Europa's ocean and had exhibited unusual behavioural changes. One researcher, Dr. James Harlow, had been removed from the second Europa mission after becoming obsessed with the audio recordings. His notes, which became increasingly disjointed over time, described voices calling from the deep and ancient intelligence waiting to be awakened. He disappeared 3 months after being dismissed from the project, last seen near a remote lake in northern Canada. His body was never found. I confronted Eleanor in private the next day, showing her what I'd found. For a long moment she said nothing, then sighed heavily. "We hope to protect you and the others from unnecessary anxiety," she finally said. "Yes, we've heard these sounds before. Every probe that's penetrated Europa's ocean has encountered them, dating back to the first Chinese mission 12 years ago." "And you didn't think this was relevant information for your audio analyst to have?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "I've been working with these recordings for months, thinking I was the first to hear them. You let me believe I had made a discovery." "You did make a discovery, Alex," Eleanor said, her tone softening. "You found patterns no one else detected. You established the connection to the trench. Previous missions barely scratched the surface of understanding what we're dealing with." "What happened to the other probes?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "The same thing that happened to Clipper. They reached a certain depth, encountered something, and were damaged. Communications became sporadic, then ceased entirely." "And Dr. Harlow? What happened to him?" Eleanor's expression darkened. "James was susceptible. He started hearing the sounds even when he wasn't listening to the recordings. He claimed they were calling to him specifically." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "There's more. The sounds, they affect people who listen to them extensively. Changes in brain activity, disrupted sleep patterns. Some researchers reported feeling compelled to return to the original recordings again and again." "Like an addiction," I murmured, thinking of my own obsession. "Or like influence," Eleanor replied quietly. "The unfiltered recordings you've been working with were processed specifically to minimize these effects. The raw data is considered too dangerous for prolonged exposure." I felt a chill run through me as I realized the implications. "You've been filtering the audio before I receive it?" She nodded. "Standard protocol for all audio analysts working with the Europa data. It's for your protection." "Yet we're sending humans there," I said. "With every possible precaution," she assured me. "The Odyssey has been designed with extensive shielding, not just from radiation, but from whatever might be generating these signals. The crew will be monitored constantly for any psychological changes." Her words should have reassured me. They didn't. "Why wasn't I told about this?" I asked. "I've been experiencing exactly the symptoms you're describing. The dreams, the obsession, the feeling that the sounds are calling to me. I thought I was just overworked." Eleanor's face showed genuine concern. We monitor all project personnel for signs of unusual psychological effects. Your case has been borderline. Not severe enough to warrant removal from the project, but concerning." She hesitated. "I fought to keep you on the team, Alex. Your expertise is invaluable, and frankly, you've shown more resilience than many others who've worked with these recordings." I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. "What about the other crew members for the Odyssey mission?" I asked. "Have they been exposed to the unfiltered recordings?" "No," Eleanor said firmly. "And they won't be. That's part of why you're so important to this mission, Alex. You've developed a tolerance, an ability to analyze these sounds without becoming completely overwhelmed by them. We need that expertise on Europa." I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt like a lab rat that had survived an experiment. "I need some time to process this," I said, standing to leave. "Of course," Eleanor replied. "But Alex, be careful, don't go looking for the unfiltered recordings. They're restricted for a reason." I nodded non-committally and left her office, my mind racing. She had confirmed my suspicions, but raised even more questions. What was generating these sounds? Why did they affect human psychology so powerfully? And most importantly, what would we find when we reached Europa? The next few months were a blur of training, preparation, and medical examinations. The Odyssey mission was accelerated, with launch now scheduled for early March instead of April. Every crew member was subjected to rigorous psychological evaluations, with particular attention paid to any unusual dreams or obsessive behaviors. I passed every test, largely by hiding the truth. The dreams had intensified, vivid immersions in Europa's ocean, where I could now distinctly hear the howling all around me. Sometimes I awoke still hearing it, the sound lingering in my consciousness like an echo. My fellow crew members were an impressive group: astrophysicists, marine biologists, geologists, engineers, and medical specialists. Dr. Patel, who had been analysing the Clipper data remotely, would be joining us as our chief geologist. Dr. Keller was our robotics expert, responsible for the submersibles we would deploy in Europa's ocean. Dr. Nakamura was our exobiologist, charged with analysing any life forms we might encounter. And then there was Commander Jackson, a former Navy SEAL turned astronaut, who would lead our mission. He was the only one who didn't seem excited about the prospect of discovering alien life. When I asked him about it during one of our training exercises, his response was telling. "In my experience," he said, "unknown territory is always dangerous territory. We're not just explorers, Dr. Winters. We're the first line of defense for Earth if whatever is down there turns out to be hostile." His words stayed with me, adding to my growing unease. 2 weeks before launch, another partial transmission from Clipper arrived. This one contained only audio, 17 seconds of the now familiar howling, but with a new quality to it. It seemed more focused, more directed, as if the source had become aware of being recorded. I spent days analysing it, comparing it to previous recordings. The complexity had increased exponentially. What had started as simple calls now contained layers of overlapping frequencies, modulations that seemed almost like language. I couldn't prove it, but I sensed something communicating, reaching out across the vast distance between worlds. The night before launch, while the rest of the crew celebrated at a private gathering, I returned to my quarters at the Space Center. Using my security clearance, I accessed the original unfiltered recordings from all previous missions, including Clipper. I knew the risk. I told myself it was necessary, that I needed to understand what we were facing before we arrived at Europa. I set up my equipment, put on my highest quality headphones, and began to listen. The difference was immediate and profound. What I had heard before was a shadow, a diluted sample. This was the full symphony, complex beyond human composition. As it played, the room around me seemed to fade. I felt the cold pressure of deep water, but it wasn't frightening anymore. It was comforting, like returning to a place I'd always belonged. Visions filled my mind. Vast entities moving through Europa's black depths, ancient beyond comprehension. They weren't life as we understand it, yet they were undeniably alive and aware. They existed in symbiosis with the moon itself, drawing energy from its core, shaping its oceans over billions of years. They had been there since the beginning, since Europa's formation. They had watched Jupiter's storms rage for eons, felt the gravitational pull of the gas giant shape their watery world. They had evolved in ways unimaginable to terrestrial life, developing senses and abilities suited to their unique environment. I saw their awareness extend beyond Europa, tendrils of consciousness reaching through space, touching other worlds, including our own. Earth's oceans had felt their distant influence since the first single-celled organisms appeared. Human myths of sea monsters and gods from the deep weren't just stories, they were ancestral memories of contact. I understood then why the sounds affected human psychology so powerfully. They resonated with something buried deep in our evolutionary past, a memory of when our ancestors were still marine creatures, when they too had heard the call from the depths of space. Most terrifying was the realization that the howling wasn't a warning, as I'd first thought. It was a lure, calling to something deeply buried in our evolutionary past, drawing us closer. Each probe we sent was answered with a stronger call. And now we were answering in person. I don't know how long I listened before I managed to tear the headphones away. Minutes or hours. My nose was bleeding, my heart racing. On my computer screen, I saw that I'd been typing continuously, while in my trance-like state, page after page of text I had no memory writing. Much of it was gibberish, but certain phrases stood out with chilling clarity. They have been waiting. The water remembers what we came from. They will help us return. The transformation has already begun. That last line sent a chill through me. I wiped the blood from my face and read through what I had written. Most was incomprehensible, but there were diagrams, crude sketches of massive flowing entities that seemed to be both flesh and water simultaneously, and there were descriptions of a process, a transformation that occurred when these entities made contact with other life forms. I should have reported this experience immediately. I should have withdrawn from the mission, warned others about what I'd learned. Instead, I closed the files, erased all evidence of my access, and cleaned myself up. The call was too strong now. I needed to see them, to hear them directly, to understand what they wanted from us. Launch day arrived bright and clear. The Odyssey sat on its pad, a gleaming monument to human ingenuity and ambition. News crews from around the world had gathered to witness the historic moment, humanity's first manned mission to another world's ocean. No one mentioned the true purpose of our journey in the press conference. As far as the public was concerned, we were conducting a scientific exploration of Europa's subsurface ocean, searching for microbial life. The evidence of something more complex, more intelligent, remained classified. As we suited up for launch, Dr. Nakamura noticed the dried blood on my upper lip. "Are you all right, Alex?" she asked quietly. "Just a nosebleed," I replied. "Dry air in the preparation room." She looked unconvinced, but didn't press the issue. The next morning, I boarded the Odyssey with the rest of the crew, 12 of humanity's brightest minds embarking on the most significant journey in our species' history. As the massive engines ignited and pressed us back into our seats, I felt a strange sense of inevitability, of coming full circle. Dr. Patel, strapped into the seat beside me, noticed my expression. "Having second thoughts, Alex?" I managed to smile. No second thoughts, just realizing that some discoveries find us, rather than the other way around. The journey to Jupiter would take 5 months, even with our advanced propulsion system. The crew settled into routines, conducting experiments, maintaining the ship's systems, and preparing for our arrival at Europa. I spent much of my time in the ship's audio lab, a small room I had helped design specifically for analysing the sounds we expected to encounter. It was equipped with the most advanced acoustic analysis technology available, though I knew now that no technology could truly make sense of what we were hearing. The howling had been in my dreams every night since we left Earth's atmosphere, each time louder, each time clearer, each time feeling more like a welcome home. I didn't mention this to the ship's doctor during our regular psychological evaluations. Some things were better kept private. 3 months into our journey, Commander Jackson called me to his quarters. He was reviewing video feeds from our approach to Jupiter on his personal display. "You've been distant lately, Dr. Winters," he said without preamble. "The crew's noticed. I've noticed." "I'm focused on the mission," I replied. "Are you?" He turned to face me directly. "Because it seems to me like you're focused on something else entirely, something you're not sharing with the rest of us." I hesitated. Could I trust him with what I knew? With what I suspected? Would he believe me? Or would he see me as compromised? A threat to the mission? "I've been having dreams," I admitted finally, "about Europa, about what we might find there." Jackson's expression remained neutral. "We're all having dreams, Doctor. That's not unusual for a mission of this magnitude. What concerns me is that you've been isolating yourself, spending hours in the audio lab with the door locked." I hadn't realized my behavior had been so obvious. "I'm just trying to be prepared," I said, "to understand what we're dealing with." "And what exactly are we dealing with, in your opinion?" I chose my words carefully. "Something unlike anything we've encountered before. Something that might challenge our entire understanding of life, of intelligence." Jackson nodded slowly. "That's what the official reports say. But I think you know more than what's in those reports. I think you've experienced something you haven't shared with the rest of us." He was more perceptive than I'd given him credit for. "Would you believe me if I told you that what's waiting for us on Europa has been influencing human development for millions of years? That it's calling to us specifically, drawing us there for a purpose we don't understand?" "That sounds like the kind of thinking that got Dr. Harlow removed from the project," Jackson said evenly. "But yes, I might believe you. I've seen enough strange things in my life to know that the universe is far more complex than we can comprehend." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The sounds, the howling, it's affecting me. I know it is, but I also know that I need to be there, to hear it directly, to understand. Jackson was silent for a long moment. "I'm going to trust you, Dr. Winters, but I'm also going to be watching you. If at any point I believe you're compromised, that you're a danger to this mission or to Earth, I will take appropriate action. Do you understand?" I nodded. "Perfectly." "Good." He turned back to his display. "Now get some rest. We'll be approaching Jupiter in less than 2 months." The remaining weeks of our journey passed in a blur. Jupiter grew larger in our viewing portals each day, a massive swirling giant that dwarfed everything around it. And then finally we saw Europa, a pale white disk against the gas giant's turbulent clouds. As we established orbit around the moon, the entire crew gathered in the observation deck. Europa filled our view now, its icy surface crisscrossed with dark lines like cracks in a porcelain sculpture. "Beautiful," Dr. Nakamura whispered. And it was, but all I could think about was what lay beneath that frozen surface, what was waiting for us. The descent to Europa's surface was smooth, our lander touching down on a relatively flat area near the equator. Phase 1 of our mission involved drilling through the ice layer to create an access point for our submersibles. The advanced thermal drill we'd brought was capable of penetrating the ice much faster than Clipper had, but it would still take nearly a week to reach the liquid ocean below. As the drill worked, I found myself spending more time at the edge of our camp, staring out at Europa's desolate landscape. Jupiter hung in the sky, enormous and imposing, its presence a constant reminder of how far we were from home. Dr. Patel joined me one evening as I stood there. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. "Just thinking about what we might find down there," I replied. "Microbial life would be extraordinary enough," he said. "But you're expecting something more, aren't you?" I nodded. "The sounds, they're not made by microbes, Patel." "No," he agreed, "they're not." He hesitated, then added, "I've been having dreams too, Alex. Dreams of dark water and something else, something watching." I turned to him, surprised. "You never mentioned that during our preparations." "Would you have, if it meant being removed from the mission?" I had to concede his point. "How long?" "Since we left Earth," he admitted. "At first, I thought it was just anxiety about the mission, but they've gotten more vivid the closer we get to Europa. Last night I dreamed I was swimming in an endless ocean, and something was calling to me, something ancient and vast." "Have you told anyone else?" He shook his head. "Only you. I thought you might understand." "I do," I said quietly, "more than you know." 6 days later, the drill broke through to the ocean. We gathered around the monitors as the first camera feeds came through, showing the underside of Europa's ice shell and the dark water beyond. "Preparing to deploy Submersible 1, Dr. Keller announced. All systems nominal." The submersible was lowered into the access shaft, its powerful lights illuminating the ice walls as it descended. After 20 minutes, it emerged into the open ocean, its cameras capturing the first direct images of Europa's alien sea. The water was clearer than we'd expected, with a faint bluish tint. Particles drifted in the current, some possibly organic in nature. The submersible's sensors detected a complex mixture of chemicals in the water, including many of the building blocks of life as we knew it. "Proceeding to Phase 2, Commander Jackson announced. Dr. Winters, it's your show now." I moved to the acoustic monitoring station we'd set up near the access point. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The chance to listen directly to Europa's ocean, without the delay of transmissions to Earth, without the filtering that had been applied to previous recordings. "Deploying hydrophones," I announced, activating the specialized audio equipment attached to the submersible. "Beginning acoustic survey." At first, there was only the ambient noise of the ocean, currents flowing, ice shifting far above. Then, faintly at first but growing stronger, came the howling. It was different hearing it directly, unfiltered by millions of miles of space. Richer, more complex, more alive. I felt it resonating, not just in my ears but throughout my entire body, as if my very cells were responding to it. "Are you getting this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The rest of the crew had fallen silent, all eyes on the acoustic waveforms dancing across my screen. What is that?" Dr. Nakamura asked. "That," I said, "is what we came here to find." The submersible continued its descent, following the source of the sounds. As it approached the trench, the same one Clipper had discovered, the signals intensified. "I'm detecting massive thermal anomalies ahead," Dr. Patel reported, "and the chemical composition of the water is changing, oxygen levels rising, along with several compounds I can't immediately identify." "Visual contact with the trench perimeter," Dr. Keller announced. "Camera feeds on main display." The main screen showed the edge of the abyss, a massive dark opening in the ocean floor, stretching beyond the range of our lights. The walls of the trench displayed the same unusual patterns we'd seen in Clipper's final transmissions, but now in much greater detail. "Those are not natural formations," Dr. Nakamura stated, voicing what we were all thinking. Those are structures. They're artificial. Or at least, they appeared artificial by our understanding. Vast geometric patterns were carved or grown into the rock, forming complex lattices that seemed to pulse with faint bioluminescence. They might have been millions of years old, or they might have been created yesterday. There was no way to tell in this timeless environment. Beginning descent into the trench, Dr. Keller said, his voice tight with tension. Commander Jackson stepped forward. Proceed with extreme caution. At the first sign of danger, we abort and return to the surface. As the submersible sank deeper into the trench, the howling changed. It became more focused, more directed, as if it knew we were listening. The patterns shifted, transforming into something that almost resembled language. It's responding to our presence, I said, adjusting my equipment to capture every nuance of the sounds. It knows we're here. Can you determine a point of origin? Commander Jackson asked. I studied the acoustic data. The signals are coming from multiple sources, but the strongest concentration is approximately 2 kilometers deeper, near the center of the trench. That's beyond our submersible's safe operational depth, Dr. Keller warned. We need to see what's down there, I insisted, my heart racing with anticipation. We might never get another chance. Commander Jackson considered for a moment, then nodded. Proceed to maximum safe depth. No further without direct authorization. The submersible continued its descent, light straining against the increasing darkness. At 3,000 meters below the ocean floor, the trench widened into a vast chamber, its ceiling aglow with more of the strange bioluminescent patterns. And there, in the center of the chamber, we saw them. Vast flowing entities that seemed to be composed of both matter and energy, constantly shifting between states of being. They moved through the water with impossible grace, their forms defying easy description, part jellyfish, part cephalopod, part something entirely alien. Pulses of light rippled across their surfaces, corresponding perfectly with the modulations in the howling that now filled our audio systems. My God, someone whispered behind me. The entities circled something at the center of the chamber, a structure unlike anything we'd ever seen. It appeared to be a massive crystal formation, but it pulsed with internal light and energy, sending waves of bioluminescence throughout the chamber with each pulse. What is that? Dr. Nakamura asked, her scientific detachment momentarily forgotten. I think, I said slowly, the realization dawning on me. It's a transmitter, or a receiver, or both. The entities continued their dance around the crystal structure, their movements becoming more agitated as our submersible hovered at the edge of the chamber. The howling intensified, becoming almost painfully beautiful in its complexity. And then one of the entities broke away from the group and moved toward us. Pull back, Commander Jackson ordered sharply. Wait, I said, raising a hand. It's not attacking, it's investigating. The entity approached our submersible slowly, its form constantly shifting and flowing. As it drew closer, I could see that what we had taken for a single organism was actually a colony of smaller entities working in perfect harmony, their combined intelligence far greater than the sum of its parts. The howling changed again, becoming more directed, more specific, aimed directly at our submersible, and somehow impossibly I understood it. Not as language translated into English, but as pure concepts transferring directly into my consciousness. It's speaking to us, I whispered. What? Commander Jackson demanded. What's it saying? I struggled to put the alien concepts into human words. It's welcoming us. It says they've been waiting for us to come, that they've been calling to us for a very long time. How can you possibly know that? Dr. Nakamura asked, her voice filled with both wonder and skepticism. I couldn't explain it, how the sounds were bypassing my ears and speaking directly to some deeper part of my brain. I just know. The entity moved closer to the submersible, enveloping it partially in its flowing form. Our sensors went wild, recording data that would take years to fully analyze. It wants us to join them, I continued, the alien thoughts flowing into my mind. It says humans came from the ocean originally, and they can help us return. A chill ran through the room as the implications of my words sank in. Return how? Commander Jackson asked cautiously. Before I could answer, the entity released a pulse of energy that temporarily disrupted our systems. When the submersible's cameras came back online, the entity had retreated to join the others around the crystal structure. All systems show nominal function, Dr. Keller reported, his voice shaking slightly. But something's changed. The water composition around us has been altered. Dr. Patel studied the chemical analysis. There are new compounds in the water, complex organic molecules I've never seen before, and they're replicating. Pull the submersible back, Commander Jackson ordered. Now. As Dr. Keller initiated the ascent sequence, I remained transfixed by the acoustic data flowing across my screen. The howling had changed again, becoming something almost like a lullaby, gentle, soothing, yet filled with ancient power. They're not trying to harm us, I said, suddenly certain. They're trying to transform us, to help us evolve. That's not their decision to make, Commander Jackson replied firmly. We're returning to the surface and reporting our findings. Earth will decide how to proceed. But even as the submersible rose toward the surface, I knew it was already too late. The molecules released by the entity were in the water surrounding our base. They would find their way to us eventually, through microscopic imperfections in our equipment, through the samples we were collecting. The transformation had already begun. We returned to Earth 3 months later as heroes, the first humans to confirm the existence of intelligent alien life. Our data, our recordings, our images of the entities in Europa's ocean made headlines around the world. Scientists pored over every detail, governments formed committees to determine how to proceed, religious leaders struggled to integrate this new reality into their worldviews. But they didn't know everything. They didn't know about the dreams that now plagued not just me, but the entire crew, dreams of dark water and ancient entities calling us back to Europa. They didn't know about the subtle changes in our physiology that had begun during our return journey, changes that baffled our medical team, but which I understood all too well. They didn't know that what we had discovered on Europa wasn't just reaching out to us, it was becoming part of us. 6 months after our return, plans were announced for a second manned mission to Europa, larger, better equipped, with the goal of establishing a permanent research station beneath the ice. I was appointed scientific director of the mission, despite concerns about my increasingly erratic behavior and the unusual brain activity patterns I'd been exhibiting. The night before the official announcement, I stood on the beach near Cape Canaveral, listening to the familiar sound of Earth's ocean waves, but beneath that sound, almost too faint to detect, I could hear it, the howling. Not from Europa this time, but from deep within Earth's own oceans, awakened by our return, by what we had brought back with us. I knew then what the entities had meant by helping us return. They weren't just calling humans back to Europa, they were bringing Europa to Earth. The transformation had begun millions of years ago when their signals first reached our world, influencing the evolution of life in our oceans. Now it was accelerating, spreading through the crew of the Odyssey, soon to spread further. Not an invasion, a reunion. A completion of a cycle began when life first emerged in our solar system. As I stood there on the shore, feeling the changes progressing within my body, within my mind, I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt a strange sense of peace, of rightness. The water called to me, and I knew that soon I would answer. We all would. The howling from Europa had never been a warning, it had been a promise of what we would become.